Before we get into today's episode, listeners, I just want to thank our sponsors. Without our sponsors, we couldn't bring you this podcast. So today we have two sponsors, the first of which is Restaurant.com. With Restaurant.com, you can save at thousands of restaurants across the country with just a few clicks. Their dining deals range from $5 to $100. They never expire, and they cost a fraction of the face value. Dinner has never been easier with Restaurant.com, used for dine-in, takeout, or delivery. Restaurant.com is offering our listeners 50% off their next purchase by going to www.restaurant.com/podcast. That's www.restaurant.com/podcast for 50% off your next purchase. Restaurant.com, the best deal every meal. And our second sponsor for this episode is Nightcap, the drink spiking prevention scrunchie. Do you ever feel uncomfortable at a bar with your drink exposed? Are you someone who covers their drink with their hand or their napkin? Now you don't have to. Nightcap is a fun solution to a serious problem. It can be worn as a wristband or a hair tie and taken out to cover up your drink at any time. According to alcohol.org, 56% of women have reported having their drink spiked at some point. It's time to take action with Nightcap. With the holidays coming up, giving Nightcap to a friend or a loved one is the perfect way to show that you care about their safety. Go to nightcapit.com, that's NIGHTCAPIT.com, and enter the code BARTALK, all capital letters with a space in between bar and talk, for 20% off your order, valid until November 31st. And now, let's get into the podcast.
Across the line, the Gulf Stream, I've been in Tampa Bay, around the horn, and home again, 'cause that is the sailor's way.
Welcome back to the Old Colony Cast, a podcast about all things Plymouth and surrounding areas. I am Andy, your host, and today I am joined, as always, by Hannah.
Hello.
And Fish.
Hello.
And today we have a special guest joining us from Florida, correct?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Chris Balzano. And Chris, you are an author, and today we're going to be talking about something near and dear to Fish's heart because he lives in the middle of it. But we're going to be talking about the Bridgewater Triangle, and you literally wrote the book on it.
I have. I've written 2 books on the Bridgewater Triangle. It's kind of a crazy thing that we have a saying now that the triangle will never get big, that it's something that is obsessive. It's an obsessive topic for people who are in the area and anyone who hears about it. But people aren't hearing about it as much as they should. And mine are some of the only books that have actually been published, even though there are great writers and great researchers in that area. So I feel kind of honored to have been able to break through.
Yeah, it's funny. I used to live smack dab in the middle of it. I lived in Bridgewater on North Street, and even then, I had never even heard about it. And so for our listeners, exactly what is the Bridgewater Triangle?
The Bridgewater Triangle is an area roughly 200 square miles, depending on how you interpret the triangle, that was first dubbed by Lauren Coleman, who is the famous cryptozoologist who has dabbled in a lot of other things over the years. And in the late 70s, he was in Bridgewater and exploring some of the odd Fortean, unusual things in Bridgewater. And he kind of expanded it to East Bridgewater and West Bridgewater. And as he started to do his work, he expanded it outward until where he came up with these endpoints and dubbed it the Bridgewater Triangle. And those endpoints were Abington, Freetown, and Rehoboth. Over the years, I mean, a lot of researchers have kind of expanded those boundaries based on the limitations of what Coleman had originally said, which, he comes right out and says, even in one of my books, that it was only a template. But everything within this area that you could possibly want to experience having to do with the paranormal or the supernatural exists. Ghosts, UFOs, Bigfoot, zombies, unexplained lights, weird cryptids such as demon dogs and pterodactyls and thunderbirds, and then of course Pukwudgies, and other little things, time slips. I mean, whatever you want to imagine in the paranormal, or if you've seen on some kind of program or read in a book, it exists within this area, and it exists in a frequency that's not seen in most places around the world.
The only thing I ever experienced in living in that area was time slips. I'd be out drinking, and then I'd wake up, and it was suddenly the next day. I don't know what happened.
Well, you were probably someone else's zombie then at that point.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what that was. But it's kind of centered around the Thehakamak Swamp. Is that correct?
Depending on how you view it, the Thehakamak Swamp is kind of known as the heart of it, only in that it is, in addition to being roughly in the center, it is also the most visible, or at least the most tangible place where you have a convergence of what possibly could have been some kind of reasoning for things, but also a swamp and a primordial swamp that there are parts of it that are still unexplored, or at least not explored very well, not developed at least. And so you have that as the center of a lot of different cryptid sightings and UFO spottings.
Is there what's the most earliest recording of some sort of weirdo thing happening?
In the Bridgewater Triangle or Thehakamak?
Either, I suppose. I kind of think of them as one and the same. Although,
oh my word! Please don't, because I'm actually my specialty is every place but the Thehakamak Swamp.
Okay.
Because I follow the paranormal threads of these as opposed to the supernatural. The distinction being, one might even argue that like cryptids, like things like Bigfoot and thunderbirds and those and even UFOs are not paranormal. They're more supernatural, or you could just say that they're real. So, I know that there were UFO sightings in the early colonial days in the Bridgewater Triangle area. But I also know that, in doing my research, the Wampanoag and some of the other tribes that were in the area didn't like the Bridgewater Triangle. They didn't like town. They didn't like the Thehakamak Swamp, or at least they understood there was something powerful and spiritual about it. Its name means place where spirits dwell. But then even places like Freetown, which is what my first book is about, the town my first book is about, they didn't want it. Like, they were more than happy to give away the Freetown Purchase and give this huge tract of land for not a lot of money, because they didn't want to go there, and they only went there when they kind of had to.
We're still giving away houses in Freetown for not a lot of money, so that's accurate.
And Freetown has like its own history and its own heartbeat and everything like that. So when you say what is the center of it, for me, the physical center is the Thehakamak, but the emotional center is Freetown, because Freetown is like a microcosm of the Bridgewater Triangle itself, in that it's got this rich and violent history, along with all this rich and violent paranormal history, and of course has been the center for cult activity and cattle mutilations, and as well as tons and tons of ghost sightings and kind of weird and unusual experiences.
Well, sorry. Go ahead, Hannah. Go ahead.
I was just he mentioned history, so I wanted to get into that a little bit.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think, I've heard him say, I'm like pointing down like we're at the Brady Bunch or something.
It's funny because I'm above you on my screen. So.
Oh, okay. Wait.
Up this way, yeah.
Wait, do a high five.
I was one of my favorite documentaries is the Bridgewater Triangle one, which I was just recapping with you in it. So, yes. And the King Philip's War plays a pretty big part in it. Well, at least historically, right?
Right.
And possibly a theory for why things are the way they are there.
Yeah. So, for years, people have kind of put forth that, and I think this has a lot to do with, in the mid-'90s, there were newspaper articles, especially focused on the satanic cult and the cattle mutilations, that questioned why this area of Massachusetts was so tainted, why it was so cursed, it would seem. And a psychic came forth who explored Freetown and said, this is because of what happened during King Philip's War. And I mean, that's a great theory because so many horrific things happened during King Philip's War. So many different locations within the Bridgewater Triangle were the sites of massacres and were the sites of what we would call now war crimes.
Yeah.
And that idea, that psychic, that one little line in that newspaper became recycled and reused and we not back then, but we would say like it was retweeted and reposted. But every researcher going forth with Bridgewater Triangle information kind of put that forward. And I live here in Florida, and the history of Florida and conquering or settlement is the history of the Spanish coming in and just wiping out everything that they saw, right? Including the French that had been there before them, which doesn't get talked about. That's not the way the British did things, right? The British were slick. The British were, we're going to come in and we're going to slowly convert you to Christianity. And then we're going to say, only if you're a Christian group can we trade with you, and you can't travel on this path if you're not the... And so they slowly started to convert the Wampanoags and the Native American tribes to Christianity. That's their MO. That's how they did things. So to go from that to this absolutely horrific war where they were wiping villages out, where on both sides women and children were getting slaughtered, that's not in their personality. It's almost as if they were possessed. And so I actually put forth, as well as some other people, that the King Philip's War is actually a symptom of whatever is dark about the Bridgewater Triangle. And it's every time you peel off a layer of this and you look at it and you think you found out what might be causing it, you actually kind of put it up as a symptom or another argument for the Bridgewater Triangle having historically been evil or cursed in some way. And so it's you can play it either way because, if you're looking for a solution to the problem of what's causing it, that's a really good way to point. But it actually, when you look closely at it, it's not. It's a symptom.
So anyone who lives in the Bridgewater Triangle is essentially evil fish.
I'm not saying no. I mean, I have a goatee. I think that's kind of a dead giveaway.
Yeah.
I'm obviously my own evil twin, and it's just how it is.
Well, it's funny because when I was taking stories for Ghosts of the Bridgewater Triangle, which is about, little hauntings and kind of more famously historical ones in the Triangle, I would come across people who were perfectly normal, and then when they moved into the Triangle, bad things happened, So roommates who were best friends who lived, someplace, let's say, I think it was Brockton, they moved into the Bridgewater Triangle, and almost immediately, in addition to seeing these weird ghosts, they started to beat each other's throats. Like as if their mind was just not theirs anymore. So I'm not saying you're evil, but you might be on your way depending on how long you've been there.
His whole life, he's evil.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so he's totally evil. All right.
Yeah.
It's too late, yeah. I'm a lost cause. It's fine.
Soaked in it.
Is there
Burn some sage for you or something?
Is there one specific? I mean, you pretty much said it runs the gambit of paranormal activity, but is there like one thing that's super prominent? Is it like more ghosts? Is it more like I lived there for a while. I never met or saw a Yeti, but
What town did you live in?
I lived in Bridgewater, right on North Street, like almost in the West Bridgewater line.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things, and I think it has to do with the influence of the Thehakamak in different places, that you have almost a personality to each of the different areas within the Bridgewater Triangle. So like the Thehakamak and the places surrounding them, Raynham, Bridgewater, I would say these places are so much more having these weird cryptid, especially Bigfoot sightings. And then like that seems to be 24 seems to be UFO corridor. It's like a super highway from Earth, from 24 all the way to whatever galaxy these aliens might be coming from. And also a lot of black helicopters and government conspiracy theories. And then as you move out to the other apexes, especially Freetown and Rehoboth. Rehoboth is ghost town. I mean, it is, and it's a town that over the course of years has somewhat embraced their personality or the idea that this is a really haunted town, but they're quaint little, almost like colonial ghosts. A lot of that has to do with Charles Robinson being from Rehoboth, or at least writing from Rehoboth.
And who would that be?
He is a really influential anthropologist who on the side used to write this little article for the Rehoboth newspaper where he would talk about legends and ghostly legends. Then in 1994, he published a book called The New England Ghost Files. And this book skyrocketed. It almost has like cult status now. So many people who are into ghosts, especially investigators who are into the weirdness of New England, claim to like that book is their Bible. I have 3 copies of it myself at my house. And the way that he presented the cases was almost very scientific. And because he was an anthropologist, he was not an paranormal investigator or even really a folklorist. He was just being told these stories as he was studying other things, and he compiled them. So it's very, very straightforward. But he lived in Rehoboth. So about a third of the stories take place in Rehoboth and are kind of legends. The Redhead Hitchhiker of Route 44, the Horbine School, the Shade Factory Pond. These were all places, or are still places, and stories that you can go out and explore yourself, right? And so the book became very popular, almost as like a user's manual for the Bridgewater Triangle, because you could actually go to Shade Factory Pond and you could try to a Palmer Burial Ground. You could Horbine School. You could go to these places and you could try to experience something. And if you were a paranormal investigator or what they call a ghost hunter, you might even go out there and try to get evidence from these places. And so that definitely gained the reputation as being like the ghost town. And then you have Freetown, which, you know, its personality does run the gamut because there is so much different kind of activity there. But if there's a dark and sinister side to the dark and sinister side, which is the Bridgewater Triangle, it's in Freetown. And so Freetown has the reputation of the darker ghosts, of negative energy, which draws in murderers and which draws in serial killers, and which is used, and even the ghost stories that come out of there, like things like the ghosts at the Sonnet Ledge. These have a much more negative impact, and I think really probably the overall darkness of Freetown somewhat taints some of the other stuff that's going on in the Bridgewater Triangle, whereas not all of it's evil, but it's definitely this overwhelming evil coming out of Freetown.
So for our Freetown listeners, we're sorry.
If you're living in Freetown, you know all these stories. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know about Carl Drew, and you know about the highway murders, which are still unsolved, and you know about things like Big Dan, and you know, Fall River used to be part of Freetown. So when I talk about the Bridgewater Triangle, I always include Lizzie Borden, always include some of the stuff that's happened, like at Big Dan's and stuff like that, because, you know, it's impossible to say, and this is where I would, you know, talk with Lauren Coleman about these things. You can't, you know, just because you're not into ghosts doesn't mean you can't follow the ghost story. If you're saying these weird things happen, you got to follow the ghost story. And just because there's a state line, you can't, or a town line, you can't say, well, now the next one's not. And so I've extended it past that, and so you have a whole bunch of evil things that the people in that area know about. They can recite it like this.
Oh, sure. I feel, and the interesting thing about living here is I feel like there's houses that I have had like 2 sets of friends who don't know each other, lived in at different times, and both of them are like, yeah, that house is definitely haunted.
Yeah.
But, and then the same thing is, you mentioned the Route 44 serial killer.
Two different areas. One is Route 44 in Rehoboth,
yeah,
and the other is the highway killings, which took place in Fall River, New Bedford, Freetown, around that area. And
like that one I had never even heard of. So I feel like every time you turn over a rock, some serial killer or horrible murder or Hannah falls out. It is one
of those things. And so if you don't know who Alan Alves is, he is a police detective who he's actually the first black African-American police officer in Massachusetts. He claims he is. I tried to own that path. I couldn't find him earlier, and he's Cape Verdean.
I was just going to say that he's definitely Cape Verdean.
Yes. And if he's living in that area, right? And so he is, I always say he should have been Barney Fife, right? Like, he's in Freetown. You know, at that time, I think it might have been more horses than people. He should have had a really easy existence as a police officer, and yet he was called out to so many different homicides that police officers in New York would be put to shame. And not only that, but there was so much criminal activity that had a cult slant to it, that he actually became one of the leading authorities on occult crime in the United States, and was actually sometimes called in from other countries. I remember he was called into the Swedes called upon him to try to break some of the codes of what was going on in occult crime that was happening in their country. I mean, this is a guy who should have gone into obscurity, and yet time after time he had to be called upon to not only investigate murders but investigate cult murders. And so, he is one of the what do you call it? The highway killings. The first body that was found in Freetown. So he was one of the first people on it. And almost immediately, because he was on it, it got a cult twist to it. And in my book, Dark Woods, I mean, part of what I'm talking about in that book is the same negative energy which draws ghosts in, which draws these weird Pukwudgies in, which draws these unexplained things in. Could it also be the same negative energy which makes there be more crime, more mental health issues in Freetown and in the Bridgewater Triangle in general, more the higher percentage of teen suicide? And I put forth that the highway killings were the act of a cult, because that's what Alan Al's investigated for a decade, and that's what he put forth. Although, in more recent times, which I'm not necessarily allowed to talk about, that cult aspect has been played down, and they think they're close to finding the real killer. But there definitely was an unusual occult twist to those murders as they were going on.
So we've mentioned it a couple times by name, and I feel like if you don't live in this area, and even if you do, you may not even know what the hell it is. But what's a Pukwudgie?
All right, so a Pukwudgie is I'm looking at the clock, because once we say the P word, usually things get taken over, and it becomes like, once you go down that rabbit hole or that Pukwudgie hole, it's hard to get out of it. But they are a 3-foot tall troll type creature who has he's strong in Wampanoag folklore. He's strong in folklore of a lot of Native American tribes, and I would argue people all across the world. I mean, he is the typical troll-like trickster spirit, right? So originally he was just kind of like annoyed. He would pull tricks on the Native Americans. Mashop, who is the creator god of the Wampanoags, went on a vacation, meaning that he found a woman that he really liked who lived in the water, and he went out to sea for however long to be with her and leaving his wife. And the Pukwudgies went crazy. They started burning villages. They started kidnapping Wampanoag. And pretty much anything for hundreds of years, when something bad would happen, the Wampanoag would say the Pukwudgies did it. Like, they're the ones that are responsible for it. And they've been known to hunt in Freetown, but then all over New England, often by using these glowing balls of light, which are called tai-pai-wunkas. We might call them ghost lights or orbs or things like that. And those are the spirits of people that they've directly led to their death, so they've kind of collected their soul. And they use that brilliance, that light, to draw other people in and push them over cliffs, drown them in water, get them to a secluded area. And these Pukwudgies, I think partly because they're to blame for so many things wrong, they're almost like little supermen in that, hey, of all of these magical abilities, they can, disappear. But more likely they transform into another animal. They have poison arrows. They can shapeshift. I mean, they really kind of run the gamut of everything you would want or not want in a super enemy. So, and these reports are real, right? So when I was writing, I didn't know what a Pukwudgie was. I had never heard the word. The word wasn't even really in kind of the lexicon. It wasn't out there yet. And I started getting reports of people who would see these things in the woods, right? And all the reports were the same. They would see them in the woods, and they described it the same way: 3 foot tall, shaggy hair, belly a little over its, its belly was over its waist a little bit, elongated nose, and they would see it and they would stop, and then something would happen and they would look back and it wasn't there. Then a few nights afterwards, they would be in their bed. One of them was waiting for his girlfriend in a parking lot, and the Pukwudgie came back. And the Pukwudgie just kind of stared them down, not saying anything, just giving them a look, kind of saying, I know where you live. Don't go back out into those woods. I know where you live. And every person reported the same thing, and they were looking at me going, this is a paranormal experience. I know it is. I have no idea what it is, until I started digging kind of deep into Wampanoag folklore and was able to find it and kind of show them some pictures and stuff like that. And they were like, yeah, that's kind of what I saw, but it also looked a little bit like this. And, it's funny because when I was doing my research, the only reference was a kid's book, a kid's book called The Good Giant and the Bad Pukwudgie. Now, if you go online, there are millions and millions of hits for it, right? I mean, it just is overwhelming. There are pictures. Most of the pictures look absolutely nothing like a Pukwudgie. They've like vicious with claws and these teeth, and they're drooling, and they've got porcupine hair, and it's all this crazy thing. And most importantly, they were stolen. I can't say they were stolen from me, but she did kind of take my research, J.K. Rowling, and made them an important figure in the American leg of the Harry Potter story. So she gives me no money for it either.
The Pukwudgies were in Harry Potter? I don't.
So what do you call it? Ivermore, or whatever the American version is?
Fantastic Beasts?
Yeah.
Is it part of that?
Okay.
When the first witch from England comes over to America, she's essentially like cast out, and she's going to die in the forest, and she comes, because it takes place in New England.
Oh, okay.
Comes across a Pukwudgie who she names William. And the Pukwudgie kind of gets her through those first harsh years, and ends up becoming one of the 4 houses of that Hogwarts, of that magical school.
Oh, okay. I have not seen that movie, so that's why I was kind of confused there.
Yeah, I mean, they're deep in the lore. They're not even mentioned in the movies. The school itself is mentioned in the movies, but it's not like, in the middle of Johnny Depp acting, a Pukwudgie pops its head out and says hi. But it's definitely something that she's now kind of taken that. She totally changed the personality and the function of the Pukwudgie, but still it's out there, and it's now really popular. And there's Pukwudgie beer. There's bands named Pukwudgie. It's on every single paranormal TV show. Eventually they'll get around to, well, do you think it's a Pukwudgie? And so it's interesting as a folklorist, which I consider myself now, to see the evolution of this in popular culture.
Was there any other part during your research that you were surprised by or had never heard of?
I think the zombies really took me by surprise.
Yeah, you said that, and I've never heard any reference to zombies in the Bridgewater Triangle.
There are 2 different kinds of zombies, and you're not. Yeah, you're still in Bridgewater. Or you're out of.
I'm in Plymouth now.
Okay, so you're safe. But I started getting these reports a little bit. That's funny. I started getting these reports of. And I got probably 5 or 6 of them in the course of 2 years after I had published the first book, of people saying there are these emotionless, soulless people that they have found walking around Bridgewater. Now, obviously,
fish.
Okay, now I'll pause, and you can tell the jokes.
All right.
And these are people like I have dealt with people on meth. I've dealt with people on heroin. I've dealt with people with mental health issues. This is not that. So imagine the freakiest parts of like black-eyed children. Now put it into an adult and put them in the middle of a bank or in the middle of a busy street. And that's what people are during the daytime. And that's what people are experiencing. And I got reports of those for years. And then doing the research for Dark Woods, I came across maybe a dozen different people telling me reports of running into zombies in the forest. Now, it has to be noted that Freetown essentially is a dump site for crimes in Plymouth, in Boston, in Brockton, in Rhode Island, places from Rhode Island. You can be from wherever your metropolitan area is to the Freetown State Forest in the middle of nowhere in an hour. And so a lot of people would commit crimes and then dump the bodies in Freetown. And that's kind of how it gains its reputation. And so there was a lot of drugs going through those woods. And especially having to deal with the Portuguese and the Cape Verdean cultures that still are dominant in that area, they have a history of religion that is much like Santeria and voodoo, in that there's a strong belief in the creation of zombies. And so some people feel that these people who would be lumbering through the woods in the middle of the night, seeming like they just dug themselves out of a grave, seeming to have unnatural speed and the ability to catch up to moving cars, and even to be relentless in their pursuit, and you would go someplace else and it would pop up again. Some people feel that these were drug deals gone bad, or like a training site where people would drug and then bury people and try to use suggestion in those types of hallucinogenic drugs to get these people to believe that they were zombies. So it's kind of hard to tell exactly where the story came from. But, this is before The Walking Dead. This is, to actually hear stories of people saying, oh, no, those forests, those woods over there have zombies in them, was probably one of the most unusual things that I had heard before I even started to get looking into things. So,
and that's one of those, through pop culture, zombie has really kind of taken on a new description, and voodoo.
Those two are very different. That soulless kind of person that's in Bridgewater is dramatically different from the covered in dirt, seeming to lumber and when walking after you in the middle of the woods. Those are two, different ends of the spectrum there, and yet both of them are being reported in the Triangle.
A lot of stuff going on in that place.
Have I stumped you? A little bit.
I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, so what do you do with that? Like when you hear a report like that, a zombie, like you're saying pop culture, a zombie is the closest thing that you can say to it, especially when you've got Alan Al's talking about, Palo Malto and stuff like that. I always mispronounce that word. And Santeria in one ear saying that this is something that's prevalent in that area. And you're hearing, and that that's part of their ceremonies is creating these zombies. Are they real? Are they real undead people, or are they just people who have been convinced that they are? Like in the movie Serpent and the Rainbow, would probably be a good example. Am I dating myself saying Serpent and the Rainbow?
Yes, but I'm right there with you. So
okay, all right.
Forget these millennials.
All right, beautiful. If I can have one person understand me, that's better than I do in my classroom. So,
you earlier mentioned things like Bigfoot and giant birds. Now, is this like Bigfoot, or is it more like a skunk ape? Like, there's a lot of flavors of big feet.
I'm with you. And I think that's more of just what regional people call them, right? So, here in Florida, they're all skunk ape, right? And we've come across a few different legends. We've tracked down a few different legends that have to do with something we're working on in areas that are high skunk ape zones, I guess you would call them. Now, there does seem to be several different kinds of Bigfoot in the Bridgewater Triangle. So, one of the famous reports has it where they were, I think it was in Bridgewater itself, where they had the cop car that was almost flipped over by one. And then you have other ones that are in the Thehakamak that have that horrible stench like a skunk ape. Mm-hmm. So it's really hard because you can't have them and put them side by side and see what the difference is between them. You just have to go by like what they do or what people experience. So it's really hard to tell the difference between those things, but I just kind of all classify them as Bigfoot, and then it kind of breaks off depending on where you are in the country or in the world as to what they're called. But, it's funny because you now have Bigfoot specialists. So when I started looking into this, I was looking into just the stories from Rehoboth. I didn't know what the Bridgewater Triangle was. And I want
to make a big podiatrist joke, but I'm not going
to. And I came across Chris Pittman and his research, and he had been focused on Bigfoot and UFOs. And what neither of us knew was that we had worked with each other for a few years in Alston. It was literally side by side next to each other in my sister's sandwich shop for years, and didn't know that we were both doing the same research on the same area at the same time until years later when we discovered each other online and we're like, oh, wait a minute, I know you. I cooked with you. And he was like really, really breaking all of these cases. And if you look at things like MUFON, if you look at the sites that show sightings of and encounters with Bigfoot, when you look at the Bridgewater Triangle, it's like you can't even notice the dots anymore because they're just like, up. There's so many of them. And it's interesting because those are so much more solid because there's no ghost reporting society the way that there is a UFO reporting society or a Bigfoot reporting society. They usually tend to go unnoticed until maybe even years later when people talk about them to someone. And so I always feel like of the three legs of the Bridgewater Triangle, UFO, cryptids, and ghosts, I'm on the weakest leg. But there really is, for people, just like if you are into Bigfoot and if you're into UFOs, just look at some of those maps and you will see a crazy correlation between, the areas and the towns that are in the Bridgewater Triangle and the amount of encounters people have.
So when you were here, did you do any of the paranormal ghost hunter style investigations?
Yeah, I was kind of called upon to. I mean, I have two books that are called Picture Yourself Ghost Hunting and Picture Yourself Capturing Ghosts on Film. So it was one of those things where I began in what I now know and would call, which is what I do now, which is legend trip. So I went out and I tried to experience these hauntings that people were talking about, and these legendary hauntings. As I got more into it, now all of a sudden people were asking me to come investigate, or we were trying to prove that something weird was going on. And so you go to some place like Rehoboth and that stretch on Route 66, and rather than just flicking the lights on and off, trying to get the redheaded hitchhiker to make itself known, you would walk that stretch of road with EMF, right? And try to get something. Or you would go to Anawan Rock, which is right down the road from there, and you would try to get heat signatures, and you would try to get, measure the EMF that was in, or the EMF that was in the area. Try to measure temperature differences. So I did do a lot more of the investigating route because I felt I needed to. Like I was getting called upon for people to understand the Bridgewater Triangle, and I wanted to give them something. And so for a while, I was an investigator as well. Yeah.
And what is, I live in Plymouth. There's at least 2 different ghost tours and a lantern tour. And
yeah.
What's the most haunted-y, ghosty place you've been to?
The Sonnet Ledge. Don't even need to finish your sentence. The Sonnet Ledge.
And what is it?
It's in Freetown. I have never been to the Sonnet Ledge and not had something weird happen. And if people want to, I can tell Hannah's about to do this. I can just tell from as soon as I say it. If people want to go and look up a video called Pukwudgies Gone Wild. No, what is it called?
Oh, I've already seen it.
All right, she's already seen it, right?
I don't need to look it up.
Is it literally called Pukwudgies Gone Wild?
Pukwudgies Gone Wild. What is it called? What is it? Is it?
Hold on. I
named it after the animals thing that was really popular at the time.
Because I'm just thinking of Pukwudgies lifting their shirt, being like,
"Woo!"
Yeah.
So I was writing Picture Yourself Ghost Hunting, right? And the idea was I wanted to use. I never belonged to a group. I don't believe in paranormal groups. And the more that I was an investigator, the more that I didn't like paranormal groups. So I've never attached myself. I just go out with good people that I trust.
Okay.
So in the book, I wanted to focus on how different groups. You guys are all looking at it now.
We're totally Googling this right now.
I could say anything right now, and you're not even listening.
Yeah, sure. No, yeah.
And so I'm just going to promote my new book while you guys are talking. Right. And so I wanted to focus on different groups that had different approaches to the paranormal. And I wanted to show them in different environments. And I thought the Sonnet Ledge is a great place to bring this group, which was the New England Ghost Project is what they called themselves, after the New England Ghost Files book. Ron Kolick, he runs his own show. And they were an interesting group to go out with because they were uber technical, right? They had thermal imaging from like professional grade thermal imaging before it was popular and everyone was using it because one of their members was a firefighter and used it to find people in buildings. So they had this really, really tech edge to them, and yet they also had a trans medium who would try to communicate with the spirits, and that often involved, if you're watching the video, it often involves her getting possessed or taken over. And so we were...
That's the one.
Right. That's, by the way, if you want to know, that's me who takes her legs out at the end.
Oh, really?
With the baseball hat backwards? Yeah, that's me. That's my training as a teacher in a jail right there. But as we were going through several times, and they have pictures of this, there were faces. Like you'd be pointing that camera into the woods, and all of a sudden a face would just appear on the camera, which is unusual, right? Because it measures different temperatures. So the odds of a face appearing is unusual. And we were investigating the Sonnet Ledge, which has a history of, there's a woman in white who jumps from the ledge over 100 feet into the quarry below. There's history of ghost lights, which seem to be floating up from the water, almost as if they're trying to escape. If you ask police, there could be hundreds of bodies down there where people have dumped because it's so cold and it's so far down deep that they can't bring equipment down there. There have been multiple suicides of people jumping off the ledge. So we're there and we're exploring and we're trying to capture some of this. And of course, like there usually is, there's a group of teenagers partying at the top, right? At the top of the ledge. And we're getting ready to pack up. We're literally packing up. The cameraman who was filming for my book, for the video for my book, has packed it up. And all of a sudden I just felt, and I'm not sensitive, especially not then, I just felt like atmospheric change, like almost as if, boom, like a storm was about to hit. And I said, something's different. I said, wait, something's different. And then I looked at that woman who you see, who often, you gets physically, involved in what's going on. I looked at her and I said, you know what I'm talking about. And before I could finish the sentence, her eyes rolled into the back of her head. And rather than trying to lead her spiritually to the path of light, I told the cameraman to come back. Come on, come back. We're getting good stuff here. And then you have the video, right? Which seems to be a woman. I said Pukwudgies. When Pukwudgies attack, that's what it's called. I said when Pukwudgies attack because they specifically were going Pukwudgie hunting. That's what they wanted. That's what they were at the Sonnet Ledge for. And also, it sounds good for when you're selling something. She gets taken over by something. Her eyes flip back. She starts screaming in this weird demonic voice, which does not sound like a human could make it. What you can't see in that video is that when she goes the furthest back she's about a foot from the water. And like I said, that water, in addition to being ice cold, drops off into nothingness. It's a quarry, drops off into very, very deep, very, very quick. And so she was essentially putting herself in harm. So if she was pretending, she did a really good job of pretending. So, yeah. And every time I've been there, something has happened. Every time I've been there, I was trying to record an interview with someone who experienced the woman in white. 3 different times I recorded the interview with him. And all 3 times the recording didn't come out. Now you guys are here. You have all your technical equipment. What are the odds of 3 very specific times not being able to capture an interview? I'm an idiot, but I'm not that big of an idiot.
So other than that, I feel like we could go on forever, but we're coming up.
Are we doing a 2-parter here, or?
Is there like one other favorite story of yours that like really stands out?
I mean, I would say, it's Lizzie Borden is always a trip, and Lizzie Borden's her own show, right? Like,
we actually just recorded at the Lizzie Borden house.
Oh, did you really?
But mysteriously, the episode disappeared, and it has nothing to do with Fish's computer's a hunk of junk.
Okay.
we lost 6 episodes, not just that one.
Oh my word!
Yeah, it happens.
I know that I lost an entire show that I had taken down, was about to put back up in the anyway. So she's her own beast. You can't even get into the Lizzie Borden house. But I would probably say, the
was there like a lesser known one maybe that people aren't that familiar
lesser
with?
known?
Yeah.
I mean, I think the cemeteries in Rehoboth. You have the Palmer Burial Ground. You have the Colonial Burial Ground. You have all of these different places. Rehoboth has more cemeteries, I think, than any town in the world. And they're not all these big, huge cemeteries. A lot of them are these small family plots and things like that. And places like the Palmer River Burial Ground all have great legends attached to them. And it's so rare to go into one of those cemeteries and not have something unusual happen. Whether I think it's in the Palm River Burial Ground, where someone will, especially if you go in with a female, they'll give like a cat call. And
Hannah, you're female.
It up. So Hannah, if you're, there's also the Shade Fact, or actually the Horbine School. When I went there, every time I've gone there 3 times. Every time I've gone there, people that I'm with, but not me, have felt hands reaching out from the ground, kind of pulling them into the ground. That's never happened to me. And I've never heard of it happening to anyone else, but everyone I seem to go with to that location experiences that same thing. And I don't really tell them about it. They just have it. If you can, get on the property. I don't even know what the situation is with it right now, but Taunton State is one of those great places where, and I'm experiencing the same thing with the research I'm doing now on a project I'm working here in Florida. Taunton State, the building, horrible history, crazy things going on. Supposed to be the site of satanic rituals in the basement. You were talking about, when you start to hear reports from a different house or the same house from different people over the course of years. I have 5 years working as a teacher in juvenile detention. The number of kids I had who came from Taunton State, which is a secure lockup or was a secure lockup for kids, who reported seeing shadow men in their room at night. They all described it the same way. And I'm talking about, I didn't deal with like kids who were in there for vandalism. We're talking kids from drugs, sexual molestation, gangbangers, like the whole gamut of crimes. These were tough kids, and they were reduced to like these withering little puddles because they'd wake up at night and they would see quote unquote venom in the corner of their room up off the ground, just staring at them. That same thing is seen on the grounds of Taunton State. So I don't know if you can get on there and see that, but people in the surrounding neighborhoods also report ghosts in their house, seeing these dark figures who walk the streets near Taunton State at night. So that's a really good place if you can to go and investigate or check out.
I get the feeling Hannah has been there.
I have.
Do you have a story, Hannah?
No, nothing really happened. It was scary. It's definitely spooky, but no, I didn't have any. My friend, other than my friend falling through the floor into like the old
that's right. You told us about that.
I'm gonna like 3 feet of.
I'm gonna pretend that I didn't hear you say that you were on the grounds and in the buildings and stuff. So
yeah,
that was within or outside of the statute of limitations when she was there.
Yeah.
You know?
Like how I'm now allowed to talk about the things I did at Danvers back in the day, but when I was still in Massachusetts, let's just say a certain property company contacted me and threatened to sue me if I kept writing about Danvers and telling about going in the tunnels down there. So, but now I guess I'm allowed to because, hey, they can't follow me to Florida. Who wants to come to Florida?
So, Chris, I feel like we have not only met a friend, but a future recurring podcast guest. This has been great. I feel like we just scratched the surface.
Anytime you want to have me on my podcast, it's called Tripping on Legends.
So let's talk about your book.
For a bit here?
I was getting there. It's kind of like thanking you. So let's hear your podcast and also your books.
Yeah, of course.
I was going to get there.
Maybe, hey, you know what? Maybe this interview is why I've been watching, old videos of like, the devil came up to Boston and stuff like that today. I don't know why. My Freetown or my Triangle books are called Ghosts of the Bridgewater Triangle and Dark Woods, Cults, Crime, and the Paranormal in the Freetown State Forest. I've got 7 other books under my belt. My newest one is coming out in a week, but you can pre-order it. It's called Haunted Florida Love Stories, which is all about different ghosts and legendary kind of haunted locations within Florida where love is the backstory. I am the host of Tripping on Legends, which you can hear wherever you get podcasts, or you can listen to me live Tuesday nights at 9:00 on midnight.fm. And of course, website, trippingonlegends.com or facebook.com/trippingonlegends. Pretty much, if you ignore the pictures that you find when you do it, you can Google me and you'll be able to find something that I'm working on and find me.
Nice. And they can check out when Pukwudgies attack.
And you can check out when Pukwudgies attack. Man, I wish I had monetized that video.
So is your book on Amazon? Can people just go on Amazon and find it?
All those books that I just mentioned are on Amazon as well as Haunted Objects, Ghostly Adventures, and like I said, picture yourself ghost hunting, picture yourself capturing ghosts on film.
Awesome. Chris, it was fantastic. I feel like we literally just kind of gave you the Cliff Notes version of the Bridgewater Triangle. Maybe when we delve deep into each individual thing, we'll bring you back.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to go over, and you know what? There's a lot of really good people out there too. So, if you're doing a Zoom meeting and you can allow more people in, there are some experts in different towns and different subjects that could totally hook you guys up with. Because your audience is going to get blown away by some of the specifics that have been going on in the past 10 years since I left.
Awesome. Yeah, that'd be great. And as we all know, Hannah loves murder.
No, to kill people. With
kindness. Yeah. Well, your first episode, you're like, I love murder podcasts. No, but Chris, it was an absolute pleasure, and we'd love to have you back on in the future. And to our listeners, this is the part where we stop talking. Thanks for listening to the podcast. You can find us on all social medias at Inebri-art, except for Instagram, we're at Inebri-art6. You can email us with your questions, complaints, and whatnot at Inebri-art@yahoo.com. And if you're looking for more podcasts, you can check out the other podcasts on our network, Retro Redoctopus, America's Hometown Horror, and, of course, Bar Talk, Old Colony, and Inebri-art Podcast, the original. So check those out and subscribe and comment so we can reach more people, and thanks for listening.